I want to tell you about some miracles today that actually happened. I verified it. I personally know the guy that I'm going to be talking about today. Hi, my name's Andrew. This is Faith Boost. I'm sharing ancient secrets that work in the modern world, where we're looking at Abraham in Genesis chapter 18 as he stands on a mountain and the Lord is on the mountain. And on behalf of mankind, Abraham is talking to God about the future of a city-state, about the future of the world, a place called Sodom and Gomorrah. And again, I want to remind us that Abraham was not appointed by anybody to do this. He was not chosen to be a priest or a leader or a rabbi or a pastor. He didn't have a title like that. He was a businessman. He was a farmer. He was just doing his thing. He had this incredible public life. People knew him as a businessman. They knew him as a very successful guy. He was respected by the nations and the leaders around him at that time. But we also see in Abraham's life, he had this private life, a secret life, if you like. And they weren't bad secrets, they were good secrets. He encountered God. And I've been talking a lot about these encounters with God. Sometimes encounters with God are for us, but God also wants us to encounter him on behalf of other people as well. And as Abraham is talking to God about Sodom and Gomorrah, they start to negotiate and talk about what God is going to do. You know, years ago, I met a man called Luke Franklin. He was from Papua New Guinea. One of his parents, I believe, was from Bogia on the north coast of Papua New Guinea. The other parent was from a place called New Ireland, just over near New Britain there in Papua New Guinea. And Pastor Luke was a man that God used. He went to Vanuatu as a missionary and he started a church there and God started to use him. Now, one day he told me the story that he was up early praying one morning and he had a sense in his heart, in a personal time of prayer, time with God alone, that God wanted to do some miracles that day. He didn't know what that meant. And as he's there praying, little did he know, in a hospital in the capital of Vanuatu, Port Vila, there was a woman in the hospital who was pregnant and she went to the hospital and the doctors told her the baby has died. You know, the baby in your womb is dead and we need to flush it out. So they put her on a drip and some sort of drug was going to flush the baby out. And she was so sad that she'd lost her baby. And she's sitting in this hospital room just really depressed and sad. And a nurse walked by and said, "What's wrong?" And she told her the story. And the nurse said, "My pastor, Pastor Luke Franklin, he prays for people and miracles happen. Let's go and see Pastor Luke." So they actually ripped the drip out of her arm and they escaped from the hospital and they made their way to Pastor Luke's house. Now, he didn't know all this. He's just at home praying privately, just like Abraham on the mountain, and sensing that God wants to do a miracle. And these women turned up. They told him the story. And this lady with the pregnant stomach, whose baby was dead, Pastor Luke got his wife and he said to her name's Helen, lay hands on the lady's stomach. She laid hands on the pregnant lady's stomach and Pastor Luke commanded life to come back into the stomach of that woman, commanded the baby to come back to life. You know, the lady felt the baby kick. She felt the life come back in the child. He said, "Go back to the hospital." They went back to the hospital. And when they got back to the hospital, the staff were like, "Where have you been? Get back on the drip. Get back in the room." And she said, "No, the baby's alive. The baby's alive." They said, no, the baby's dead." She said, "Test the baby again." They tested and sure enough, there was life in the baby. And that woman gave birth to that baby. It was a miracle. It was a public miracle, but it started privately in Pastor Luke's private personal life, just like Abraham had a private life. Now, this is an amazing story because a journalist heard about the story, because this is the major hospital in Vanuatu, and called Pastor Luke on the phone and said, "Oh, are you Luke Franklin? We need to talk to you about this miracle that's happened." And Pastor Luke just said, "I got no comment," just walked away. Didn't seek any publicity. Didn't try and make a big deal out of it, didn't try and hype it up. And this reminds me of Jesus. Jesus was like this too. Many times Jesus did miracles and he just kind of slipped away. He didn't seek publicity for himself. He didn't try and become, the center of everyone's attention. He wanted people to focus on the Lord. Even when those lepers were cleansed, do you remember what he said? He said, "Go back to the temple and offer up an offering there and tell the priest that, God has done a miracle here." But what I want to encourage you today with is this. Have a private life with God where you draw down his power, you draw down his spirit so that God can use you to do miracles in the world. You may not be a pastor, you may not be a leader, it doesn't matter. Maybe you are, that's cool too. But God wants to use all of us to bring miracles and to bring his power into this world. But it starts in a private place, in a secret place of prayer.